Congratulations on Tim's upcoming marriage. Timothy Eugene Scott is an American businessman and politician serving as the junior United States Senator from South Carolina since 2013. A member of the Republican Party, he previously served as a Charleston City Councilor, a state representative, and a U.S. representative. He also worked in financial services before entering politics. Scott served on the Charleston County Council from 1995 to 2009. He then served in the South Carolina General Assembly from 2009 to 2011 and represented South Carolina's 1st Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives from 2011 to 2013. Nikki Haley, who was then governor of South Carolina, appointed Scott to the U.S. Senate in 2013 to fill a vacancy. He retained his Senate seat after winning a special election in 2014 and was elected to a full term in 2016 and re-elected in 2022. He became the first African American senator to be elected from the southern United States since the Reconstruction era. Scott was a candidate in the 2024 Republican Party presidential primaries, forming an exploratory committee on April 13, 2023. He filed Federal Election Commission paperwork to run for president on May 19 and formally declared his candidacy 3 days later. Scott suspended his campaign on November 12 of that year due to low poll numbers. Early life and education. Tim Scott was born in North Charleston, South Carolina, to Frances, a nursing assistant, and Ben Scott Sr. When Scott was 7 years old, his parents divorced, leaving him and his older brother, who later became a sergeant major in the U.S. Army, to grow up in working-class poverty with their mother. Frances often worked double shifts to support her family. After his parents' divorce, Scott, along with his mother and older brother, moved into his maternal grandparents' house. There, he formed a close bond with his grandfather. As a freshman at North Charleston's R.B. Stall High School, he failed several subjects, prompting his mother to send him to summer school, which he had to finance by working at a local movie theater. During this time, he met John Moniz, the owner of a nearby Chick-fil-A. Their initial interaction over a sandwich at Scott's workplace evolved into a substantial mentorship. Moniz educated Scott on individual responsibility, conservative business principles, philanthropy, and finance. From an early age, Scott enjoyed sports and excelled at football. He overcame racial prejudice in high school, securing election as student body vice president in his junior year and student body president as a senior. A month before his senior year, he fell asleep while driving, resulting in a car accident that dimmed his prospects as a football recruit. Nevertheless, he attended Presbyterian College from 1983 to 1984 on a partial football scholarship. There he was introduced to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, an encounter that led him to his Christian faith, which became a central part of his life. Scott later transferred to Charleston Southern University, where he graduated in 1988 with a Bachelor of Science degree in political science. Upon graduating from college, Scott worked as an insurance agent and financial advisor, a stepping stone toward starting his insurance agency, Tim Scott Allstate. His professional accomplishments enable Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, who is the only African-American Republican in U.S. Senate, delivered an emotional floor speech about the unfair police scrutiny he has faced over his life because he is a black man. Scott, in the course of 1 year, I've been stopped 7 times by law enforcement, Scott said. Not 4, not 5, not 6, but 7 times in 1 year as an elected official. Scott described this speech as the most difficult because it is the most personal. In many cities and towns across America, there is a deep divide between the black community and law enforcement. A trust gap, a tension that has been growing for decades. And as a family, one American family, we cannot ignore these issues, Scott said. I can certainly remember the very first time that I was pulled over by a police officer as just a youngster. I was driving a car that had an improper headlight, Scott said. The cop came over to my car, hand on his gun, and said, "Boy, don't you know your headlight is not working properly?" I felt embarrassed, ashamed, and scared, very scared. Holding up 2 fingers, Scott said there were times when he was pulled over that he was speeding. But the vast majority of the time I was pulled over for nothing more than driving a new car in the wrong neighborhood or some other reason just as trivial, he said. Scott described drawing the attention of a police officer once as he drove out of a shopping mall. The cop pulled right behind Scott and followed him as he drove home, taking 3 left turns along the way. Finally, I took a 4th left coming into my apartment complex, and then the blue lights went on. The officer approached the car and said that I did not use my turn signal on the 4th turn, Scott said. Do you really think that somehow I forgot to use my turn signal on the 4th turn? Another time Scott says he was pulled over by an officer who accused him of stealing the car he was driving. The senator recounted how his brother, who was a high-ranking enlisted man in the Army, was accused of the same thing when he was driving home one day in a Volvo. Scott also described the plight of a former staffer who sold his nice car because he was so tired of being targeted by suspicious police. Imagine the frustration, the irritation, the sense of loss of dignity that accompanies each of those stops, even here on Capitol Hill, Scott said. Scott said he has even faced problems with U.S. Capitol Police as he has arrived at work. The officers are trained to recognize all lawmakers, but Scott said he has faced attitude and forced to show his identification to get in. On 3 separate occasions, he has received calls of apology from a supervisor or the chief of the Capitol Police over the way he was treated, Scott said. It certainly takes a special sort of man to face these sorts of frustrations and still be asleep and addicted. For most traumatic experience seems to wake us up. Congratulations, Timothy Scott, for this prestigious award, March 2024, Swirler of the Month.